Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Somebody's on.
We'll just, if that happens during the meeting, we'll. No, he's good.
Deb, can you hear us? Vicky, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
right. I will bring the November 29th, 2022 Special Board of Education meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Kate Thomas,
Here.
Troy Carr,
Here.
Deb Baker,
Here.
Jim Hansen and Clay Colomb are absent with notice. JB Clapham. Here. And Michael Berkland.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I need a motion for approval of the agenda.
Motion.
Roll call, please.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy, Deb,
Yes.
Jamie
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, on to items for discussion. We have the report card tonight from Mrs. Swaggart and Mr. Talley.
All right, thank you, Madam President, school board members for being here tonight and allowing us to present our well, I don't want to call it 2022-23 report card. It's actually last year's report card. But for everyone out there listening, report cards are really not finalized and released till late October. So by the time we get the data, it's the previous year's data. So we do want to share that data with you tonight. There are quite a few slides to this PowerPoint, but I can get through them quickly because there's some areas that we really want to talk about and focus on. But for the purposes of the report card tonight, we're going to focus on the ELA and math data. And there's some comparison information in there and some longitudinal information in there that we want to talk about. And then we're going to add a few components later on, and I'll get to that towards the end. So let me share my screen here.
Can you remind me what's ELA?
Reading.
English
English language arts.
But thank you for asking,
Yes,
because
it's a good
those
question.
acronyms get really common for us and we forget to remind people.
Same.
They didn't shorten math, though. You're safe.
Okay. Let me start off with slide one. Again, this is just this is a comparison slide. This is our ELA and math results, and this is combined results for our district as a whole last year. And this is in comparison to school districts that have over 1,000 students. So it's the larger districts in the state. So you can see where we performed in ELA and also in math. Feel free to jump in and ask any questions as I go through these slides. And this is just comparison information right now. This is the second slide is comparison data, ELA and math with school districts in our region. This next slide is a roster of all of our elementary schools, K through 5 in ELA, and you can see how we perform proficient wise in comparison to districts, elementary schools, K-5 across the state that had that were resided in districts with over 1,000 students. So these again are your larger school districts in the state, your Aberdeens, your Sioux Falls, Harrisburgs, Yankton. So you can see we did have, a few schools that were up in the top 10 there between with Pinedale, Meadowbrook, Corral Drive. The green there, right about the median there, represents the average, state average for ELA, and you can see how the rest of our elementary schools performed comparatively with other elementaries across the state in large districts. give you a moment to digest that, and then I'll move on, and we certainly can revisit any of these slides if you'd like to do that. I can go back and so I'm going to move on to the math slide. Again, this is our K-5 elementary schools comparison statewide to districts that have an overall population of over 1,000. Again, your large school districts, you can see how our schools performed. Again, Pinedale, Corral Drive, and Meadowbrook were up near the top. Grandview and Rapid Valley were also above the state average. We had some schools below that, but we're close to the state average as well. And I do want to note that, you know, we'll get into this a little bit later in some of these slides, that, you know, there was a significant decrease in math scores and some drops in ELA statewide this past year, the last couple of years, just due to the pandemic, with students not being in school essentially for a year or so. We'll
Sorry.
talk more about that in a
Can I
bit.
just jump in there real quick, Mr. Talley? Just 'cause
Absolutely.
what's viewed on here is Rapid Valley right below Grandview there. It's not showing up on the big screen there, but is Rapid Valley also at 43%?
Rapid Valley is at 43%, yes, and I'm
Thank
not
you.
sure why that's not showing here on this TV screens, but yeah, Rapid Valley is right below Grandview there.
We'll
at
make sure and
43.
send this out to each of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
The people out in YouTube land.
Yeah. Yes.
This next slide here is again comparison K-5 ELA performance in comparison to local area schools. So you can see a number of area elementary schools and how our schools performed in comparison to those schools, again with our state average of 51. You got math. ELA. I said math.
Is one of these actually math and it's just?
Yes, the right
Yes.
side is.
Right side
Yeah,
is-
sorry.
Vicky Kraft is our Rhapsody Area Schools data person, and she did a lot of hard work getting this pulled together. So she's on to help us in situations like this. So
Yeah, so again, ELA on the left side, math on the right side. And again,
And
this,
apparently,
go ahead, Vicky.
I was just gonna say, apparently not hard enough to put math on the right side.
so these are some performance trends that we'll dive into grade 3. As we know, state testing starts at grade 3. It's grade 3 through 8 and 11. So all students take the Smarter Balance assessment starting in grade 3 all the way through grade 8, and then once in high school at grade 11. So there's some trend data there. You can see ELA and math proficiency by year. And you'll notice there's a gap year there, 1920. There was no 1920 as we did not test that year due to the pandemic.
I think a really important thing to notice here on this performance trend is that from 2018-19 until we tested in 2021, we had a decrease of about 10 percentage points, but that was that COVID year. And Mr. Talley is going to speak to that additionally in some other grades, but that's very apparent that what that did that year.
Yeah, you'll find, and as we get into some of these trend data slides here, you're going to see if you watch from 18-19 and then jump up to 2021, which is that 2-year gap there, you're going to see some significant decreases in ELA and math at various grade levels. Not so much at others, but in our primary or lower elementary grades, yes. So significant drops there, but you'll also look from a little bit of a rebound. So we had that 2-year window between 18-19, 20-21 there where we were in the pandemic's stages, and then you'll see we had a bit of a rebound from last year at grade 3 in ELA and also in math. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on this. This is basically, just how our third graders performed by school, in terms of levels. So when you take the standardized test, the Smarter Balance test, you will test either at a level 1, which is, what we call below basic, level 2 is basic, level 3 is proficient, and level 4 is advanced. Okay, so there's an overall percentage then is calculated for your total percent of 3 and 4. That's how they determine proficiency. So you'll see, just for example, their Pinedale, very simply just adding up level 3s and 4s to get a combination of what percentage of those students tested proficient or above, and then calculating a percentage of their total school population. So in other words, 69% of all students at Pinedale tested proficient or higher in this grade level. Does that make sense? So that's how proficiency is calculated. So you basically just want to look at the column at the right side, just to look at overall proficiency and how that's calculated. And you can see how all of our students performed in grade 3 last year at all of the respective elementary schools. So if you want to take a deep dive into those slides, a little bit later on, you can. Mr. Berkman, I know he whizzes through these as a former math teacher. He understands this because he tested students every year for the years he was at Central. Everybody good to move on? This next slide is a duplicate only but math. So you can see again proficiency in math. So again, I'll use Pinedale as an example. Again, this is districts with 1,000 students or more. The larger districts, you can see Pinedale there. In Corral Drive and Meadowbrook, showing some great results with respect to total percent of students that are in the level 3 and 4 range. You can see again the state average in the green column there. And this is ELA in comparison to ELA and math levels. So ELA on the right, math on the left. And again, this is just a comparison to area schools as far as total percent of proficiency. So we're going to move into grade 4. So how this will work, most of the rest of this PowerPoint presentation is we'll hit the next grade level slide. We'll look at the trend data, which we're seeing now. And then the next 3 slides will be that data that I just showed you for grade 3. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, you'll see with grade 4, trends from the report card last year in proficiency in ELA and math. There's that gap year again between that 2-year gap, I should say, between 18-19 and 20 and 21. So you'll see a 10-point drop during that cycle in ELA and about a 12% drop in math. And then you'll see a little bit of a trend up in math. We're about the same for ELA in grade 4. So again, this is percent of students that are proficient. Any questions on this particular slide? Then we get into the next 3 slides, which are ELA comparisons with, again, other schools across the state from districts with 1,000 or more students. You can see again where our schools scored. You can see the state average in green. And this is just ELA.
Just for understanding the chart, South Park is at 39%, but it's above the state level. So
It is looking at that total percent 3 and 4. So it's looking at the kids that were proficient or advanced. That's how that is broke down. Not the
Right.
school percent.
Total percent that are 3 and 4 that are proficient advanced.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yes.
So would that mean, just using that South Park example, that 50% of fourth graders are proficient, but 39% of their whole school is like K through 5?
Yes.
Correct.
Got it. Yeah,
Correct.
thank you.
Next slide is the math distribution. And then the third slide again is comparison to area schools. All right, move on to grade 5. Here, grade 5 trends. You can see again, 17-18 up to 21-22 last year. There's that 2-year window again. Between 18-19 and 2021, you can see there was an 8-point drop in ELA and a 12-point drop in math. And you can see there was a 3% rebound from 2021 to last year in ELA and a 6% jump in math proficiency at grade 5. There again is ELA comparison with large districts across the state. Move on to the math slide. There is comparison data for math with large districts across the state.
Mr. Tully, do we not have, actually, I just noticed when we go to the area schools, I don't see Meade County schools. Is there a specific reason? Just curious.
That I'll let Vicky jump in here and talk a little bit about. I'm not sure
I'm
why.
sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So I just, when we go to the comparisons of local schools and I see like Wall and Hot Springs and Hill City, there aren't Meade County schools listed. So
Yes,
there
there is a reason for that. I only used schools where grades were grade levels were comparable. So for example, if there was a 4 through 6 combination, that was not included. I tried to keep the grade levels comparable. So it was K5, 6-8, and 9-12. And Meade, some of the Meade schools have grade level schools, if I remember, rather than like 4-5, 2-3 type combinations versus what we are doing in Rapid with, PK through 5. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
More of an apples to apples comparison there. All right. Switching over to the middle schools. Here, again, ELA and math comparison against other middle schools with 1,000 in districts with 1,000 or more students. So Southwest Middle School had the highest ELA and math scores of any middle school in the state with a district of 1,000 or more students. You can see where West Middle School scored east, south, and north. This is a comparison between, again, other area middle schools, grades 6 to 8. We look at some trend data here. What was interesting about this, and this is a bit of good news, is we didn't have a significant, we get to the middle and high schools, you're going to see we didn't have as large of drops as we anticipated that we might in that comparison data. So that was actually some good news. So you can see that that pandemic window there of 18-19 to 2021, that 2-year there, there was a drop of basically little over 1.5 percentage points in ELA, and actually a little bit of a gain in math proficiency during that window. But we did see a 4% drop in ELA from 2021 to last year, and then a small percentage, 2.5% drop in math at grade 6. Again, this is ELA and math comparison to other schools that are from districts of 1,000 or more students. This is just like the elementary data. And again, a ELA and math comparison for grade 6 with local area schools. Let's jump into 7th grade. A little bit of trend data there. Ironically, we stayed exactly the same during that 2-year window. For grade 7 in ELA, there was a 4% drop in math. There was a nice rebound in both ELA and math at grade 7 during the 2021-22 school year. 7th grade comparison, ELA and math with schools, large schools across the state.
Jamie, I noticed that Sturgis, Meade County is shown in the large schools. So that might be one of the reasons they're not shown in the local, because they're really the only other large district close to us.
Local area. Look at 8th grade, again, that 2-year window, a 3.5% drop, but a nice little rebound in ELA last year. A 7.5 point drop during that 2-year window in math in 8th grade, but also a 3% rebound last year as well. And again, here are the 8th grade large school comparisons. Local area comparisons. Let's jump to the high school. These are again ELA and math comparisons with schools that have 1,000 or more students, school districts with 1,000 or more. Let's see where they ranked. Stevens and Central, actually, Stevens did really well in ELA last year. Central did fairly well. I know that's off from the mark in previous years. Central's always been in the mid to upper 60s, I think, in ELA. So there was a bit of a drop off, I know, last year. But both schools are above the state average. Stevens, you can see their math score above the state average, and where Central's in. So there was quite a drop in math at the high school level from the previous year.
I had a quick question on that one. Why does Rapid City High School not have a math score?
So they had it's asterisk like that if the data that is that shows proficient advanced is less than 1%. Yeah. Local area comparison. So here's some grade 11 trends. and this was interesting during that 2-year window. There was actually a little over 2% increase during that 2-year window that we've been referencing. Increase in ELA and about a 1.5% decrease in math during that time. But then there was quite a drop off in math proficiency from 2021 to 2022. You can see that's about an 11% decrease and a little bit of a drop off, about a 5.5% decrease in ELA as well.
And one thing that's super important to always realize about this is kind of comparing apples to oranges because it's always a different group of kids. So you're not testing the same kids twice for 11th grade. So in the students that were juniors in 2021 did better than the students who were juniors in the spring of 2022. That could go back to that COVID gap when they were out of school their freshman year, that math loss, learning loss there. But it's always really important to look at that information with that lens, that it's different students.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's, with the grades 3 through 8, there's always trend data. You can follow kids year to year because they take, the standardized tests for 6 consecutive years versus grade 11, where you have a 3-year gap actually before they leap from grade 8. They don't standardize test again until grade 11. So it really is a different group of kids every year. And there's so many other factors too that we won't get into and have time to talk about, but it's difficult to put your finger on just one thing. So there's ELA and math results again in comparison to larger districts. Local area. And then this is some cohort trend data. So you see up in the top left-hand corner there, it says grade 12. So that was last year's senior class. Okay, so they tested, you can see where they tested. So if you really want to look at to kind of see the mark there and look at some upward trends. So you look at in that upper right hand, last year's seniors in 2017-18, they were 8th graders. Okay, so they tested an ELA at a proficiency rate of 53%. And then in 2020-21, which is the year before last, which was when they were in grade 11, is when they took the state test, they tested at a 72.5%. So you can see that's a pretty significant increase in proficiency from their 8th grade year to their 11th grade year. So does that make sense? I hope I'm explaining it correctly.
This is showing the same grade. This is the data
This is
for
the
these.
same.
These are apples to apples
Right.
instead of apples to oranges. So we can't say it's the 100% the exact same students because we do have movement, but that class from when they were 8th graders to when that class graduated last year, there's that growth, which is pretty incredible. And I think something to be celebrated.
So if you look at the 27, last year's or that senior group last year, when they tested in 2017-18, so that's their 8th grade mark, and you can go back to 16-17 and then 15-16. So that would be their 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and then grade 11 testing. If you slide over to the top right-hand corner, you see that trend data there for this year's seniors, which is last year's juniors. Okay, so they tested at 67.8 in ELA and from grade 8 up from 48.4 as an 8th grade group. And then this year's juniors, which were last year's sophomores, you can see how they tested in middle school. Now this is the group that will test this year. So you can see 2 years prior in 18, or the last time they tested in 18-19 in grade 8, they had a 48.6% proficiency. We'll see how they do this year. And then last year's freshmen, which are this year's sophomores, they will test next year. Okay, and you can see where they tested in 2020-21 in grade 8. So does this trend data make sense?
This is my
longitudinal.
favorite slide because it shows the same kids.
The same group of kids, yeah, and tracks them through various stages of testing.
Can I just add one thing to that before you go on? On those bottom two, I just wanted to point out, we might see a spike in those as well. They haven't taken that high school test, so kind of, I was kind of wishing it was like shifted over when I was
Yeah.
looking at it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that they were lined up year by year. They haven't taken the high school test, so we might very well see, it's not like those two are doing worse. We might very
Yeah.
well see that same spike when they do take the high school test next year or this year and the year after.
Yeah. And so we went back here, you know, obviously just a couple of years, but I would imagine, because I know we tracked this a few years back, a long time ago at Central, and this is probably what you'll see is this kind of significant jump between the 8th grade and the 11th grade year. Kids obviously learn more, they mature, they take the testing a little more seriously. There's all those good things that happen. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a large incremental increase with this year's group once they test. So this is grades 6 through 8, ELA. So last year's 8th graders, 7th graders and 6th graders, which are this year's 9th graders, 8th graders and 7th graders. A little bit of concern there, I think, with this year's freshmen, you know, when they tested from grade four all the way through grade 8, you can see at grade 4, that group tested at 51.6 proficiency in ELA. And by the time they hit 8th grade, they're at 37.9. So they will not, this year's freshmen, they will not test until 2025.
We'll just add to kind of the opposite of what you said about our juniors. From 8th to 11th grade, they grow up. From 6th to 8th grade, teaching middle school now, they care a lot less. My 7th graders are very willing to take our standardized tests. Our 8th graders are not. So that could definitely be contributing to some of this as well.
Well, and one other factor too is this is a combination of all of the district data. So this includes all schools combined together. So there's some factors there too. When you look at combining multiple schools and you look at mobility, you know, some schools with higher mobility rates than others. I mean, there's just all these factors that can kind of weigh into a swing in the data. I think what you want to look is you don't want to see large dips and you want to see large increases. That's good news, but you don't want to see those really large dips. So I think what we can see as we kind of look through all these slides is there's, you know, we're a little bit, we're steady, but we're a little bit up and we're a little bit of down here and there. This is ELA in grades 3 through 5. You can see I get a chuckle out of the bottom one. That's their first testing.
That's their blimp.
So you see some good news there, increases in both the grades 4 and 5 in ELA. Let's jump into math. So here's math. We'll start off again with the high school. And I won't re-explain everything again. I think you can take a peek at those trends. So you can see there, you know, I'd note there's a little bit, obviously some concern there with the seniors and juniors last year with where they tested, but you'll notice that for our grade 10, there was a bump up in their middle school. So they'll test this year. Grade 10 will, from last year, will test this year. So we're hoping to see some increase there.
I think Mr. Berkland would agree, but I think this just shows that absence of schooling really impacted math learning. If you don't have someone there to really help structure that lesson and help you overcome your not understanding of math, that can have significant impact on student math scores.
Yeah. The one thing that really stood out to us as we went through these slides was, you know, there's the decreases in ELA are significantly less than math, obviously. In fact, we saw some increases in ELA. Not so much in math. I mean, math is really, you know, something that obviously we're concerned about. There are just larger, there are larger decreases in the math area across the board than in ELA. 6 through 8, you'll see again, that 18-19 year, that 2-year gap there. During the top 2 slides, there was a little bit of a decrease in math, about a 4, well, almost a 5-point decrease, I should say, for grade 8 last year. Grade 7, you can see a little bit of a rebound there from 2021 to 2022. So that's some good news. So there was a little bit of upward trend for this year's 7th and 8th graders in math from their previous year. And, you know, well, in grade 9 as well, a little bit of about a 3-point increase there. So there's some good news across the board. All last year's middle schoolers across the board had some increases. So we're hoping that trend continues. There's grades 3 through 5. Slight decrease in grade 5, slight increase in grade 4, and grade 3's mark at 41.7. Let's jump into ACT averages. This is ACT across the board in Rapid City. You know, over the years, I went back and looked at 20 years worth of ACT data just across, you know, not only at Central when I was there all the years, but just across the board. And we've always been really consistent and steady with ACT scores. Not too much of a jump, not too much of a decrease at either high school. You know, we've always been hovering around that 22 mark. So you'll see the averages there are pretty much unchanged. A little bit of an increase in reading, you know, steady across the board with composite. Despite the large discrepancy in math scores on the state test, there hasn't been a large decrease or gap with math scores on ACT. And that is a bit of an apples and oranges deal. And again, lots of different factors. You know, kids that take the ACT, a lot of them will do the prep course or practice stuff. There just is a whole different dynamic there.
What percentage-ish of our juniors and seniors take the ACT? I don't want to say guessing, but an educated guess.
So, well, last year was the first year that we required all of our students to take the ACT. And so that data will be on this upcoming year's report card. So we'll see how that pans out. Prior to that, it was the students that elected to take it and signed up for it. And paid.
And felt the need to do it. Some states have actually done away with state testing at the junior year and are only using ACT or SAT testing instead of the SBAC. If our state did that, we would just give the ACT the junior year. The thinking behind that is lots of times juniors are asking, what does this test do for me? And the answer with the SBAC is, we tell them that it's really important. It gives us really good information as a school district. It lets us know where we are serving our students best and where we need to work. But we don't share it with colleges. You know, that piece kind of does resonate with some high school kids. Like, what do I get out of this? I'm not going to take this very seriously. But the ACT does matter if anybody's college bound or something like that. So those states that have made that move, it's been interesting to see how that has gone. And we're doing both. So we'll be able to hopefully in the future pull some data about, are they taking one test more seriously? The downfall about that, giving everybody the ACT instead of the SBAC or the state testing, is that the ACT doesn't matter to everybody either. So.
I could just add one thing to that. I can't speak for the ELA, but the math is entirely different. It's a very, very different test. This SBAC test is things like explain why this is the solution, and it's not all multiple choice and stuff like that. There's a lot of short answer and fill in the blank. ACT is straight multiple choice. It's solve X plus 5 equals 7. It's very just like computational procedural, whereas the SBAC is a little bit more conceptual. So that's another reason why we might be seeing some of those discrepancies. I'm not saying that they're guessing, but it is easier to guess or to work backwards and do those sorts of things on the ACT compared to the SBAC.
And that's not showing here. That'll be next year. So
Yeah, kids are more likely to be able to compute and calculate than they are to explain. So I think that's a great point. Average ACT composite, our district with region, you can see there's not a big, well, districts with over 1,000, I'm sorry, on the left side, the region on the right side there, so you can see how we've done. Not a whole lot of large discrepancies in ACT scores just across the board. And then the last slide in this presentation is, because math is kind of a big area for us right now, is I did want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we are doing, because there is a lot going on right now. A lot of good things happening in terms of the investment that our district is making in our teachers and our leaders. So these are just some things I wanted to list. Obviously, for those of you that were instructional council, we are going through an elementary math adoption. There are 2 curriculums that are being piloted. And so that's happening right now. Evidence-based instructional strategies. So we're moving forward with this concept. It is going very well. I've been hearing good things from the high schools that are piloting some of this stuff in terms of just the different philosophical changes with students, and students, being a little bit more relaxed and maybe more committed to learning as opposed to worrying about the grades, that all the things that we've talked about before. We look forward to coming to you guys in January at a study session and presenting kind of a more in-depth and detailed overview of that instructional based evidence-based instruction. We were able to take some middle school teachers out to Adlai Stevenson High School last month for a visit. I went for the first time as well. Very, very neat school, very unique. They do some very good things. And so we are going to work with our middle school principals to develop a implementation plan for the middle schools. And we're going to start doing some piloting next year at the middle school levels as well. So this is really some good stuff. Professional learning communities. I want to, give, a bit of a shout out to our principals there. They've really done a good job this year, putting together PLC calendars, making that collaboration time. For example, at the high schools, it's built into the schedules as core planning time. I don't know if we had that when you were there, Michael. It might have been right after. Yeah. And just finding that additional time in the mornings. And so it's what I've noticed out in the buildings, and again, I'm new this year, but what I've noticed out in the buildings is a lot more commitment to PLCs and a lot more emphasis on making that collaboration time available for teachers. We still have a long way to go, which is my follow-up to the next bullet point. There is the instructional calendar. So we're working on a draft to bring forward to the board. One of the things we've really put an emphasis on with the calendar is the calendar really should be an instructional calendar. It shouldn't be, a calendar based on other things other than instruction. What kind of calendar promotes good teaching and learning in our schools? And so when we say that, what we'll bring forward as a recommendation, we'll have some detail in there with respect to additional time for teachers to collaborate and work together. Better alignment of our professional development days so they match up with our school improvement process. Just some things like that will help us be better at some of the things that we're doing. Math assessment training, map data protocols for instructional reports and map growth reports. So those we've made a heavy investment in the math assessments, map assessments. And so there's some ongoing training that's happening with principals. And they'll continue to receive that. So that helps them and their teachers better able to read the MAPS growth reports and utilize that data to inform instruction and change instruction and respond to students that are struggling. So that's what that's for. And we, like we've always done, we'll continue to focus on formative assessment development, which is really a key area in evidence-based learning, is not only, skill and learning target design, but assessment design as well, and aligning all that and matching that up. But again, this is good stuff, but if we want teachers to really take deep dives into this, we have to provide the time and the structure for them to be able to do that. And then just some math RTI and intervention that's happening. The adoption of the Math Bridges, which is tier 2 and 3 instruction for grades K through 8. So this is just supplemental support to help struggling students. MAP Accelerator, which is individualized and adaptive math instruction. practice, basically math practice for students in grades 3 through 8. Mathia again, which is an online component to our middle school math curriculum. And then we do offer Carnegie math coaching. We've contracted with Carnegie to come in and provide coaching with our middle school math curriculum for grades 6 through 8 this year. They've been doing some on-site visits, observing in classrooms, meeting with teachers and principals, and then, you know, providing reports for schools on areas that they can improve in. So that's some of the stuff that we've been doing this year to try to boost our math proficiency, our math aptitude.
And I would say that Mr. Talley's been working a lot with the principals about implementing our curriculum with fidelity. So making sure that if we are bringing in all of these tools to help with math growth, that we are making sure our teachers have the training and understand that that is an expectation, that we're adding these help pieces because we recognize how low our math scores, that downward trend, and we want to change that significantly. And that is the reason that we pushed back or brought forward, however you want to look at it, that we're doing the elementary math curriculum this year when it's not technically the year that it was up for adoption, but we recognize that what we had was not serving our students well. So we pushed that ahead and are working on that now because we know that we have to make significant change to raise these math scores.
Yeah, some good things going on. We talk a lot about alignment and focused and being intentional with the programming that we're bringing in. We're just not throwing a bunch of things at the wall to see what sticks. The exciting part is that, you know, as we move into strategic planning, we did put the cart a little bit before the horse, so to speak, because we're doing a lot of good things right now. And these things will smoothly transition into our strategic plan, I think, as we move into that process as well. So we're really excited to get started with that process as well. But there's a lot of good things going on out in the schools. I appreciate the teachers that have worked really hard we have a lot of really good teacher leaders out there in the buildings that are really driving the trains right now in the schools and really helping their colleagues with ways to be better instruction, really diving into data, really helping working side by side their principals in their buildings to really focus on improvements in those schools. So again, a lot of positive things going. I feel good about kind of where we're at right now because I think we understand that we have to continue to move towards better alignment in the district and making sure everything is stacked neatly on top of it with the ultimate goal of changing the outcomes that we just looked at with data. So that is that. Any questions?
More of a comment, for the evidence-based instructional strategies. When you come to a study session to show us how that's working and the opinions of the teachers and how it's working, could we have some of the students as well? Now, I don't know if you want to do that at a study session with a board meeting, but I know that instructional council has brought students in to talk about how Reading Plus is really working or different things in the past. So maybe that might be the area to bring these students, but you had a story a while ago about some of the students that have been practicing with this and really their eyes were opened and they really enjoyed the challenge of being able to be responsible for their quote unquote grade. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Just hearing from students on maybe more from the perspective, how this has changed the learning perspective that they have. I'm more interested in really hearing from the kids and seeing how maybe they might think differently in a class that is graded differently from a numerical perspective.
Right.
So that would be interesting, but definitely we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Any other questions from board members? Go ahead. So I was just wondering, and this is a challenging question that I don't know if there's an answer to, but I know prior to my being on the board and I was a part of the inter-school parent council, and one of the schools brought up, they actually have like they called it map night, and they did kind of a presentation to the parents about how like what these numbers in map mean, because I think sometimes like we have these report cards and yes, they're obviously as educators, as like all the teachers know what it means. And yes, that's important. But then we talk about in the district, our families and like
you know, it may be a good idea, I think, for us to brainstorm kind of how can we bring our families, because sometimes, just some people, it's just a bunch of numbers, like this doesn't,
Yep.
it doesn't necessarily resonate. And obviously, like, it's, you know, student, parent, teacher, like, it all works together. So if there were a way, if we had ideas, or if parents had ideas on how we could really bring parents on board and understanding like what these report cards mean, what, you know, what the statistics that their school means down to their child. I think that could be beneficial. I said there's not an easy answer to that, I recognize. But I think it might be helpful.
I think it may be something that the principals do with their own schools.
And it is a requirement of the title funding. So a title school is, I think those principals are very attuned to being able to show that and share that information well with their families that come to those math nights and sharing that testing data. I was lucky enough to be at Horace Mann earlier this year when Ms. Gorman was actually taking that time to explain to her parents about testing and the importance of it. And she said that really early in September, so that as we take these assessments and move on and get into this testing window in the spring, hopefully starting really early to talk about that will help push her students and families to be involved in that process to score well. I know that many elementary schools and middle schools talk a lot with families about, you know, even things like sleep patterns before you know, are taking these tests and having breakfast and those types of things. All of that can, you know, impact that testing window. And if you dive back in, you'll see in some of these slides, Vicky was able to pull, you know, how many students we tested. And, you know, that window is fairly big, but also when situations happen, there are students that can't be tested and that does impact. I also want to point out that I'm super excited to bring forward calendar ideas because I think the team worked really hard at making a calendar that supports instructional and learning. In fact, Mike's calling it the instructional calendar. I was calling it learning focused because I just think that we need to make that shift. But we were, I think, incredibly strategic in listening to what our employees have told us in the past, meeting those needs of employees, instruction, and families. And I'm super excited to bring that forward. We're gonna do a little bit more polishing, make sure we have it all right, and then we'll be bringing that forward. But it is designed to actually support what we're talking about. And that'll be the first time I think that's ever happened in my career.
Bishop Gar.
When did the schools get this information and what is their digestion process of this information?
So each school has access to its own report card.
Okay.
And so they should have communicated that information, you know, to their parents, of the students that attend their schools. When the SBAC reports come in, there's an individual report that gets sent home to each parent as well. So it's really easy to read. It's really, when the state put these together, they made sure that they had parents in mind and students. So when you sit down and read, it really does talk about, you know, where you scored and what that actually means. So that information went. It's just that the report card itself, the district report cards don't, unfortunately, because there's an appeal process. So you get to appeal, you get your initial data, and then there's a window that you can, and a process to go through to appeal anything. So individually as a school, you can say, okay, this data isn't right, this data isn't right. And that's prevalent in districts that have a lot of mobility and turnover too, because attendance, you know, and especially at the high school's graduation, you know, rates are often impacted by kids that are in and out a lot. So sometimes that data is not, it's inaccurate for a lot of different reasons. So there's that appeal window. You submit your appeal with documentation, and then there's about a month long or a month plus process where that information is validated and verified for each school district in South Dakota, and then that report card is released. So then the report cards, then each school has access to its report cards through what we call South Dakota Stars, and they can post those on their website. This is the district level stuff. And so our report card, there's actually a link to our report card on our website.
And I just wanted to add that, that process of appealing, I think the high schools have been very good at it, but what we discovered, Mr. Talley and I, was that, in the past, that appealing process hadn't been really talked about at the middle school or elementary levels. And we, Mr. Talley especially, we really pushed and talked about that. And Mr. Talley heard from principals like, what is this appeal? I mean, they kind of just took it as what they send us is what it is, but we can make significant changes by appealing things due to that mobility rate and things like that. And it had a high impact. But interestingly enough, even though we were pushing it, not every principal, I think, understood. But we came back together and principals were talking about, I did this and I really changed things. And so I think next year, it won't even be a question. We've sent principals to training on how to do that. We required it. So that next year, I think that will also have a very positive impact. And I think that's just a piece of having some leadership that has done this, that worked through that appeal process.
Right. I guess what my question is in a school principal letter, they get the report, we got a C-. So is there a discussion about, okay, we got a C-, what are we gonna do to do better? Is that done on a school level? Is it done on this level? I guess my initial question, is it done on a principal school building level? What are we gonna do to improve our scores? Is that a discussion?
Yep. So this is all tied into the school improvement process. So
Okay.
the initial, you get the initial data actually early on, right about the summer, just prior to the summer break.
Okay.
And then the school districts get an opportunity by a certain date in June to finish uploading. Usually you're done with all that anyway, and then you get your data back, your initial data back in August, then the appeal process happens. But what you do know is you get enough back that you pretty much know where you stand in ELA and math. There's always going to be depending on your appeal, a little bit of a move, a couple points here, a couple points there. Kind of irrelevant when you think about the bigger picture.
Sure.
So what happens then is we use that data and we put together all of this data for schools. And we have this big data retreat in early August. So all the schools bring their teacher BLT teams, principals come there. And then we go through this school improvement process where we do basically a data day, and then schools then use that data. We have this year we did something a little different. We actually put together common templates and actually have invested in a process for this. So what ends up, long story short, this morphs into a school improvement plan. So each school then writes goals and action items that reflect the data that they have.
All right, that's
So,
exactly what.
Yeah, so that's, I think,
exactly
what you're asking, yeah.
Like parent and being this, so I can, in my head, see 4 or 5 schools. I know my children's own school, but also, when I went into Horace Mann, when I went into South Park, when they actually have on their wall, like, and it says, our goal is
Okay.
this many, our reading scores to improve by this much by so-and-so.
Okay.
And they have, or our absentee rate to be this much. So it's very visible. And that's something I think is a change, a positive change, but that schools are really displaying. So if a parent walks in the building or, somebody is, my child might go to this school, they can see, this is what our report is now. This is what, so that's really been pushed out a lot and is very visible in the schools and to families. You can see like what the scores are, what the goal is by the end of the year.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Berkeley.
Thank you. I just wanted to add in, excuse me, a quick little suggestion / comment here. So as we all know, this is just a snapshot. And as we all know, a lot of this comes down to social economic status. But I was noticing that some of these schools like Rapid Valley stood out to me, Grandview at times stood out to me, are outperforming what I would expect from kind of their socioeconomic ranking probably. So I'm just wondering if maybe we can look into what are those teachers doing? You mentioned the teachers leaders, maybe looking at the teacher leaders at Rapid Valley. I think it was Rapid Valley grade 3 was like way above where I would expect them to be based off their population. And so maybe we could get some kind of in-district discussion going on there a little bit more too about how are these schools outperforming, maybe what they might be expected to do.
Did you take your? Okay, okay.
We've been talking a lot about that, with behavior and other things, but that PBIS, but that support piece and that, and then of course celebrating, we're focusing on celebrating this year as a district, but I really think that we need to do more of that, celebrating what's working and sharing those really successful things. That data retreat in August is paramount to a really powerful start in the fall. Those teachers give up their time in the summer, they come in, they do that work, and then they take that work that they started at that data retreat and they take it back during those professional development days when teachers come back before school starts. And that's where a lot of this work gets going. And then that ability to appeal or change some little tiny things, it can have significant impact because our list of schools that we're going to be on improvement, TSI and those, after the appeals process, that got much smaller.
Yep. So we went from 9 schools to 3 schools that are identified for school improvement, non-title schools
Right.
identified for school improvement. But I sound like a broken record because I use the word alignment a lot, but really it is an alignment issue. I mean, I don't think the issue is, people caring enough and teachers not working hard, things like that. I think it's bigger issues than that. It's making sure that we write a strategic plan for our district that really outlines and focuses on improving instruction, and that when we develop that the right people are at the table for that, and that everything that we put under each one of our goal statements, is a strategy that actually will work and that has some teeth in it. We have to align then the data processes and the school improvement stuff and the things that go on individually at the buildings. That's where you get, the collective input there, but you also give schools enough autonomy where they can write their own plans, as long as their goals and the things that they're doing are aligned to the big plan at the district level, which is improving instruction and some other things. And then underneath there is where you have processes, progress monitoring, making sure that we're talking about these plans all the time, looking at our data, aligning our calendar so that we say to teachers, hey, we want you to work together more and look at more data and write better assessments and do all these things. Then we better give them the time to do that and the support that they need and the training that they need. If we're not going to do all those things, if there's one hiccup in any of that process, then everything else goes off the rails. And that's why it's so important that we align everything. Our budgets, everything's got to be in complete alignment, and we're just not there yet. But I think we're making progress in getting there. It's just a big task.
Right. No other hands? Well, that was a lot of work, putting that together. Very appreciative of that. And it was a little bit easier to read through and look at than has been in the past, actually. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Vicky, just
Yes.
extend her a public handshake here, because this is a lot of work to put into. And what we didn't dive into is we didn't dive into some other things that are part of the report card, such as graduation rates, attendance, and college and career readiness. But we're going to add those components to this presentation and share that later on. It would have been too much tonight.
I appreciate that, because it can get too much to where you walk away from this when it's too much information going, what did I even learn tonight? So it's really good to break that down, I think, for us. Thank you. On to other. Does anybody have an other? Okay, I need a motion to go into executive session.
Motion.
Second. Michael?
It's just a voice. Debbie, check that.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And we will have no further action afterwards, so. Thank you.